This game was played in Riga in 1957. Tall Koblencs. e4, c5, the Sicilian defense, knight f3, d6. Tall had the white pieces and played d4, the open Sicilian, c takes d4, knight takes d4. Knight f6, knight c3, knight c6. This is the classical Sicilian. Tall played bishop g5, called the Richter Rouser. e6, queen d2, bishop e7, castles queenside. So immediately you see that Tall is planning to launch a kingside attack, keeping his king on the queen side of the board. Black castled, white played knight b3, a typical move in this variation. If he's going to be building up kingside pressure, he usually doesn't want to allow this trade. Queen b6. Here Tall played f3. His idea is very straightforward. He wants to play g4 and begin his kingside expansion. a6. Eventually this queen's going to get moved and he wants to have control of the b5 square. g4. Tall begins his kingside expansion. Black plays the move rook d8, typical of the Sicilian, preparing a central counterplay. This is what happens. White expands on the king side. Black, in a principled manner, prepares a central counterattack. These are all good, principled moves. Tall played bishop e3, because he wants to open up that square for the pawn. Queen c7, h4, preparing that pawn storm. Black begins with b5, queenside counterattack, g5, and knight d7. And here we're going to find the first Tall move. Most people would play the move h5 here, preparing g6, but not Tall. Tall doesn't mind giving up a little material to make the attack happen just a little bit faster. He played the move g6 right away, a straight pawn sacrifice. His opponent took back, h takes g6. Remember, when we're attacking a kingside with pawns, we usually have to provoke a little bit of a weakness to then use that weakness to open up files. This is the most solid pawn structure for defending a kingside or queenside when the pawns haven't moved. If a pawn is moved to h6, then a move like g5 will threaten to open up the kingside. If a move like g6 has been played, then a move like h5 will open up the kingside, opening up the h-file. So here what Tall did is he played g6 to provoke a target, h takes g6, because this way he can open up the kingside. He played the move h5. Here, instead of allowing things to get opened up like this, wide open, so that he'd also have the weak e6 square, Koblencs chose to play g takes h5. And after rook takes h5, we see a dynamic in the position which is typical of Tall. At this point, you've already become familiar with his style of play. He's given up a pawn for the open h-file. White has the potential for a big attack. Black's up material. This dynamic is unstable. It's fascinating. It's what real chess is all about, and it's what Tall thrived in. Knight f6. A good move. Black is, in this kind of situation, Black wants to start defending. Black's idea right now, he wants to create counterplay if possible, but he also needs to cover up. He needs to consolidate his king's position. He plays knight f6, attacking the rook, bringing the defensive piece back into the king side. After knight f6, Tall went back to h1. Now, your instinct might be to play a move like rook h4 to maintain the option of doubling rooks over here. But the problem with that is that tactically, it's opened up to this diagonal. There's potential for Black to make tactics work for him. If this knight moves, then this bishop will open up a line of attack on the rook. If he goes back to the h3 square, then the tactics will open up if this pawn moves. If the pawn comes to e5, it'll open up a discovered attack onto the rook this way. Black will be able to gain time by that kind of e5, the rook moves, and then d5. And now Black is gaining counterplay. If rook h2, this would have been an interesting option. It keeps the idea of rook h1 open after this bishop moves. The reason Tal preferred rook h1 is because he wanted to double up queen and rook, queen ahead of the rook to have a more decisive battery. His idea is to play the move queen to h2, doubling up on the h-file, and wanted to shoot out to queen h8 checkmate. That was Tal's idea, so he went back to h1. Here we see the principles come into play. White's threat here, very clearly, queen h2. White is attacking on the king side. Black's natural instinct should be counterattack in the center. Put those ideas together. How can black counterattack in the center and stop queen h2? There's one answer, d5. A standard, strong player's counterattacking move, guarding the h2 square, defending, and counterattacking. And now Tal made an interesting decision. This is actually a position that analysts have disagreed about. Tal chose to make a move that was in his style. He played e5, sacrificing a pawn. His idea is he doesn't want to open up the center because that will give black counterplay and the focus won't be so much on the king side. So there's no question white wants to avoid this kind of dynamic. He chose to play the move e5, sacrificing another pawn, and his idea is, for one thing, immediately he's blocking black's defense of the h2 square, so something has to happen. Black has to take that pawn somehow. But also what he's doing is keeping the center closed, sacrificing a pawn to create this whole new set of dynamics, which you'll see. Jan Timman, a really famous and great Dutch grandmaster, suggested the best move here would have been bishop f4, which is opening up an attack against the black queen, so thus defending the h2 square. So if black moves the queen, then queen h2 will be tremendous. And then Timman's idea is if Koblonks had played bishop d6, Tal could have played then bishop takes d6, queen takes d6, and now the very strong move f4, blocking off the queen's defense of the h2 square again, and notice that now this pawn still can't take on e4, opening up the center, because now it's pinned to the queen. If d takes e4, then queen takes d6, and white wins a rook. After rook takes d6, rook takes d6. So this was an improvement that was suggested by Timman. It looks very strong to me. It's not what Tal did. Tal played a typical, exciting, interesting, maybe somewhat dubious pawn sacrifice, e5. Koblonks played knight takes e5. If queen takes e5, do you see what Tal had in mind? In this kind of situation, where the pawns are cutting off some of the queen's retreat, where the h-file is cut off, what you want to look for are potential queen traps. White to play. You see how you can corral that black queen? The first move, bishop f4. Very good. Attacking the queen. The queen only has one safe square, f5. Now, how do you attack it again? Exactly, bishop d3, and the black queen is lost. You see the white rook guards the h3 and h5 squares, the bishops slice, locking off all the other squares the queen could go to, g4 is covered by the pawn on f3, white wins the queen. So for that reason, after e5, black was forced to play knight takes e5. After knight takes e5, we see a precarious position of black's knight and queen. Here your instincts as an attacker should be, okay, let's pin that knight. And Tal did. He played bishop f4, pinning the knight to the queen. The knight can't move, the queen can't move because the knight will hang. Queen h2 is threatened, which would be threatening the knight on e5 and checkmate on h8. All that stuff's in the air. There's only one good move for black. Do you see it? Imagine you're defending now. How can you block off that pin, liberate your knight to be able to move, defend everything, be able to survive? Exactly. Bishop to d6 is the only really possible move for black to play. And there's an added benefit, which is that you've opened up the square e7 to the king. Bishop d6 blocks the pin, opens up potential discoveries like knight d3 check on that bishop on f4, which could be a good counterplay. Suddenly Tal's attack is looking a little funny because the f8 to e7 route of escape is open to the king. Maybe Tal wasn't right to give up this pawn. So here Tal continued with his attack. He played the move queen h2 with the idea of shooting down to the h8 square. King f8. Just to make sure we're seeing all the tactics here, Black had one very interesting idea, which you may have noticed. The move knight d3 check is very tricky. Point being, if white takes, bishop takes d3, you see what black can play? Bishop takes f4 check, forking the king and the queen, and black wins the game. The reason knight d3 check doesn't work is a little bit hidden. Put yourself in white's shoes here. Try to put together all the factors of the position. If you make one move, you win a piece. If you make another move, you lose the game. Pretty straightforward. White to move. What should you do? The best move is king b1. Fantastic. And now, all this stuff is hanging, and black has a real problem. You see, he can't play bishop takes f4 because of what? Exactly. Queen h8 checkmate. So here, black played king f8, and Tal played queen h8 check. Now this is very early in this game. As you'll see, it gets incredibly complicated, incredibly creative, many beautiful things happen. As it turns out, this is the critical position of the struggle. When you play against someone like Tal, very often in the beginning of the attack, there's some unclarity. There's something you can do that might just stop the attack right where it started. Here, black has two decisions. He can either play knight g8. Think about that last variation we looked at, with knight d3 check, with the f4 bishop hanging in the air. Very good. Well, Koblonks played knight g8. In truth, after king e7, queen takes g7 would have been a terrible mistake. You see why? If black attacks the queen with rook g8, the queen has to move. There's only one square open to it, h6. h7 is covered by the knight on f6. After queen h6, here, black has the tactic that didn't work a move ago, but works now. Black to move. What do? Well done. Knight d3 check. And it appears that the great Mikhail Tal missed that this was in the position. After rook g8, queen h6, knight d3 check. If the white king moves to b1, say, then after knight takes f4, our best attacking piece is gone, black's up a piece, white's losing. And if he takes on d3, then what does black play? Exactly. Bishop takes f4, check, forking king and queen, black wins the game. So in fact, had Koblonks seen this tactic and played king e7, Tal would have had to go back. Queen takes g7 is impossible. He'd have to go back queen h4, and now the game is far from over, but the attack has really been neutralized. Black's up 2 pawns. Big trouble. But this is what happens to a mind under pressure. You see, Tal dictated the tone of this battle. His attacks weren't always the soundest creations. They were usually the most beautiful creations. After queen h8 check, though, black is dealing with all this stuff. He assumed, I guess, on some level that Tal understood that king e7, queen takes g7 was good. When you're playing someone like Tal, sometimes you make the mistake of trusting their judgment instead of relying on your own. Here, had Koblonks, a strong international master, taken the time to work through this position with a clear head, calmly, he might have found the move king e7, queen g7, rook g8. Queen h6, knight d3 check. This tactic certainly wasn't beyond his level, but he missed it. He played knight g8, and now the beauty begins. Tal played the move rook h7, shooting down to the 7th rank. Remember, the rook on the 7th rank is sometimes called the pig. In this particular position, it's a little bit risky. The idea, of course, is queen takes g7 check is in the air. Black can defend it with f5, which he played, and now the point is that the white queen is trapped on the h8 square. So Tal has moved from the abstract initiative into a very concrete attacking plan. Everything has to be tactically just right. If black gets a free move, plays a move like knight g6, the queen is trapped, black wins the game. White cannot allow a moment of breath for the black defenders. Here, Tal played another vintage Tal move. He piled up one more attacker on the g7 pawn. Do you see it? White to move. Think about two factors. One of black's main defensive resources is this tactic, which has been in the air for a long time, knight d3 check. And white wants to bring one more piece to attack the g7 square. Put those ideas together. White to play, what would you do? Exactly, bishop h6. Piles up on the g7 square, and now black can't take that with the knight because the knight is pinned to the king, or with the pawn because the pawn is pinned to the queen. So bishop h6 relies on that reality, piles up on g7, which black has to defend, and black defended with rook d7. Now, here Tal's thought process was probably pretty straightforward. He knew what his goal was. His goal was to bring this piece into the attack. This rook on d1 has to be brought into the attack on the g1 or h1 square. So the piece that's in the way is this bishop on f1. He wants to bring this bishop out of the way to prepare rook g1, piling up on the g7 square one more time. How do you get it out of the way? There's no time for slow moves like bishop e2, because then a move like knight g6 will be deadly. Tal has to make the tactics work. He played bishop takes b5, sacrificing the bishop with the idea of rook g1. But now, things are very delicate. The question that has to be asked, what happens if black plays knight g6, attacking the queen that's trapped on the h8 square? If knight f7, by the way, doing the same thing, the queen can jump out of the way. Queen takes g7 because the f7 knight is cut off the rook's defense of the g7 point. So every move that Tal makes, he has to be aware of this possibility of knight g6. If black had played knight g6, things are going to get incredibly complicated. So let me give you a big challenge. Do you see what white could play here? Don't worry if you can't find it. The idea is a counterplay. Black is threatening the queen. The queen can't take on g7 because it's guarded by a rook. Usually when you're looking at variations tactically, you can know as a rule that if a weaker piece is defending a pawn or a square, then a stronger piece can't go to that square. So queen takes g7 is defended by a weaker piece than the queen. Rook takes g7. That would be a big material plus for black, a mistake. So the knight is attacking the queen. White can't move the queen. White needs to counterattack. The right move is knight d4, aiming for this e6 pawn. And this is why things get really crazy. If you take the queen on h8, the knight takes e6 check, is forking the king and queen. And then after the king moves, knight takes c7, black's rook's hanging, black's other rook's hanging, black's knight's hanging, rook takes g7 is in the air. It's totally wild. Knight takes d5 is coming. This rook can jump to the attack on e1 and g1. These tactics are good for white. It's a crazy position, but it's actually a position which is kind of typical for Tal. So here, black needs to defend this e6 pawn, which is holding up the whole center and kingside. He'd have to play the move rook to e7. And now white has a resource which is completely unbelievable. Things look kind of desperate, to be honest. The queen on h8 is trapped and threatened. The knight can take it next move. If the queen takes on g7, the black rook can take it because the rook isn't pinned down to the defense of the e6 pawn. He's opened up the defense of the black bishop on c8, guarding that pawn. Okay, those are the factors in the air. Here white could play the move bishop takes g7, rook takes g7. And the next move is rather shocking. The point is that white can throw basically a rock into the gears of black's defenses. I'll give you a few minutes. Why don't you stop here and think about it? White to move. Before I say anything else, try to find it. What would you play for white here? Okay, the principle which comes into play in this position is that of the overloaded piece. Now, at the moment, there is no overloaded piece. But if you make one move, you can create an incredible problem in black's defenses, and the only way for him to keep everything in the air is to overload one of his pieces himself. This is a very unusual move, a very unusual tactic. It's the kind of thing that only truly greats like Tal would find over the chessboard in a tournament game, because, frankly, it's so counterintuitive. Here, the black queen is defending the rook. The black bishop is defending this pawn. If black has time to take this queen, obviously it's dangerous for us. But if we can somehow make all of these pieces come into the attack, maybe we can make it work. Take another chance. White to move. You see it? Well done. The correct move is bishop to d7. Kind of an earth-shattering chess move. First of all, it's blocking the queen's defense of g7. So black has to do something. Black has three main options. He can take it with the bishop, he can take it with the queen, or he can take the white queen. The most obvious move is taking the white queen. The problem with that is that here white can jump into the attack. Knight takes e6 check. You see, we've blocked the bishop's defense of the e6 pawn. Now black has to play, say, king f7. Then we can play rook takes g7 check. The king goes to f6. And now what does white play? Knight takes d5 check. Very good. Look at this. The rook is defended by the knight on e6. The bishop is just stuck down the middle of black's position. Bizarre. The knight comes to the d5 square attacking the king. The king has only one place to go. King e5. Now, white to play. What do? Drive the king deeper into your position. f4 check. Only one square left. King e4. And now, here you have checkmate in one move. The two knights do all the work. Very good. Exactly. Knight g5 checkmate. The king is checked in the middle of the board. d5 is covered by the rook. f3 and e3 are covered by the knights. f4 is covered by the knight on d5. Nowhere to go. It's all over. So we've seen that after bishop d7, this astonishing tactical move that could have kept Tal's attack alive. Black can't play knight takes h8 because of knight takes e6. That leaves two moves. If bishop takes d7, do you remember how I began this? I said you have to make a move which forces a black piece to become overloaded. Well, in this situation, knight takes e6 check. Very good. Forcing the black queen to take it, because if the king moves, the g7 rook just falls. Queen takes e6, and now, by overloading the piece, removing the defender, the g7 rook is not defended by the queen. Queen takes g7 check. The king has to move to e8. And now white can play knight takes d5, bring another piece into the attack. And now black would cover up with a move like knight 8 to e7. And here we have an incredibly rich chess position, which is totally unclear.